Ever since I was invited to speak at this event, I've been wondering why me? And that's me sitting at my computer with a big question mark over my head wondering about that. Because, again, I don't know if you can all read this cartoon. I've got experience as a service user and a researcher going back over 30 years, but as to my understanding of technology and mental health technology in particular, I have to say it's kind of like this guy, you know, hang on a minute, I know what I'm talking about. I've 30 years in this mental health industry, which I do. I just turned 60. I've got my Oyster card. I keep telling everybody this because I'm so excited. I can't believe it. Anyway, so how does that help me understand technology that is 6 months old in a youth-oriented culture? Well, I can't. I don't. So, yeah, I might hit you over the head with my modem later. What I actually want to talk about is to focus on what I do know about, I guess, which is to think a little bit more about what are the concerns, the priorities of people who use mental health services, and the potential of and for technology within that, which obviously I've been listening very closely this morning to everybody, so I know that I don't know a lot about the potential for technology. But I have a few ideas of my own. A few problems with technology that we kind of know about and we heard about this morning, and maybe a few extra ones. And then talk a bit about co-production and why, in my opinion, it's absolutely vital to include service users, people with lived experience, people who are actually going to use these apps, these technology, in the design of them. Don't just have us in as testers at the end. Why don't we get involved in the beginning? Because actually that might solve some of those implementation and adoption problems that people have. Because if possibly the product is not what people need or want, that might be one of the reasons why there are big problems in implementation and adoption. I've done it now. So I do a lot of work with the National Survivor User Network, who are a network of and for people with mental health problems. We're increasingly, I mean, like technology, changing all the time. The language is changing right now. We don't necessarily use service users so much anymore. We talk about experts by experience. We talk about people with lived experience. I don't think any of us has got the answer to the language issue in mental health any more than anyone has the answer to the technology in mental health, because actually some of us want to be called survivors. Some of us simply want to be called people. Thank you very much. Anyway, so I'll just say, so the National Survivor User Network now has a membership of about 4,500 individuals and about 650 groups. And the group membership has reduced quite significantly in the last couple of years for the reasons that you can imagine. With austerity and funding cuts, groups are disappearing very much more quickly than they are setting up and establishing. But nevertheless, we consult our membership every year about what are people's priorities, and this is from 2015, so it's the most recent sort of written up product. And what I think you notice if you have a little read of those is that quite a lot of them are not directly actually about mental health services and treatments. There's quite a bit in there about human rights, about raising awareness to challenge discrimination and stigma. And the two big ones that keep coming up at the moment with people on Twitter, Facebook, and in real life as well. Funding cuts to services and groups, small groups disappearing, but also the welfare reforms and the social inequalities faced by people with lived experience. What was the impact assessment of the welfare reforms, I wonder? But also at number 3, we've got genuine co-production and empowerment, because it is empowering for people to be involved in genuine co-production. I don't want to, you know, disappoint you or anything, but actually there's an awful lot of people out there who don't particularly find mental health treatments all that helpful. Some of the psychological therapies and medications are helpful to some people, but not everybody. I only recently talked to the parent, actually, of a young man who's only 21, who's been hearing voices for the last sort of 2 to 3 years. And he's on these medications. He's been in hospital for 4 or 5 months, and the medications haven't taken away the voices. So actually, you know, what is the value of that particular treatment in that particular case? So, you know, it's just a, you know, reality check. I suppose what I'm trying to do is a bit of a reality check, just to think about what is actually happening for people right now. There's very little choice about treatments. Most treatment for people with most diagnoses is still medication, and you have little choice about taking it. There are long waits for psychological therapies. IAPT, you know, seemed to be a great thing, but I've heard all sorts of different things about different IAPT services. I won't go into that, but you still need a diagnosis to access services and to get your welfare benefits. Many people are not happy with the diagnosis. There may well be an app that gives you your diagnosis more quickly, more effectively, but what's the point of that if it doesn't lead to some sort of way of some support, some help, some treatment? Yes, so a few other realities. There are still massive structural inequalities in access and treatment, and that's something I'm going to talk a bit more about, but we're particularly thinking there of racialized communities, people from our Black and minority ethnic communities who do not access some of the treatments, particularly psychological therapies. They don't tend to be referred as often. So how will they access the new sort of psychological therapies? They could potentially have greater access on computer, but I think we need to be aware of what those inequalities that are out there at the moment, what those inequalities are, and whether some of the new technologies that are coming in, whether they will actually enlarge those gaps and treat inequalities rather than actually doing anything to address them. And then I've put at the bottom, inpatient care is coming under more pressure, is more difficult to access and more unpleasant to access when you get there. So just a few realities about services in general. Choice, and I just put these up because I rather like the cartoons. I've had this experience, getting help from mental health services. This is a cartoonist. You can find her on Twitter. You can find her on Twitter, Ruby, etc. I am 10 years ago. 10 years ago, I was referred for psychological therapy on the NHS, and I was told I was too ill for psychological therapy on the NHS. But apparently, I could go back to work, so that was okay. I then managed to pay for my therapy myself. But it is a dilemma when, you know, you've got to be aware of the things that are already out there, the inequalities that exist now in the system, and whether we can actually do anything to make those better, I think. Okay, so some of the potential that I see out there, and connecting people is one of the things that happens already. I think what I would quite like to ask is, you know, how are people now using social media and apps to aid their mental health? You know, I'd quite like that open question to be out there, because for example, I was just telling somebody over the lunch break, during boring meetings and some other, you know, on public transport, or when I'm feeling stressed, I will just go on Instagram or Facebook and look for a picture of a cat or a story of a cat rescue. That's my particular sort of weakness. Anyone who knows me knows that I'm completely obsessed with cats. So that kind of cheers me up. It just gives me that little, oh, that's really sweet, you know. It puts a smile on my face when I'm just feeling shit. But we know that actually peer support is a massive, it's a growing a development out there in the mental health world anyway. Whatever happens in technology, peer support is going on all the time. And peer support has been supported and funded more recently through various programs, like one called Side by Side at Mind. And clearly there are computer-based forms of peer support, but not only that, but people, of course, use social media for peer support anyway. So they'll use Facebook groups and not Twitter so much, actually, but just texting each other, texting friends. And so there are apps, obviously, that do build on that as well. ElliFriends is one of the social media big white wall people will have come across. And there's a couple of others, and what I would say as well is there's one example, Mental Snap has got a stall here today. Hannah Chamberlain's in the audience, I believe, somewhere. I'll show you a little bit more about that in a moment. But that is an app that's been developed by a service user. And, you know, there she is still working on it, developing it, just got an award for it. You know, let's work together to make these things more helpful, more useful to people. I'd like to know whether it might be useful to have some technological assistance for people who are really struggling to fill in benefits forms. That would be fantastic, wouldn't it? You know, an app that actually helped you to fill in your benefits form or to make an appeal when you needed it. And the fundamental one, which is knowing where and who to turn to in a crisis. I've just been told 5 minutes. Oh, my God. I'm anywhere near finished. Benefits of peer support. Mental Snap. Okay, I won't show you the video. I'll just tell you about Mental Snap. So it's a space for you to tell your story. The app basically gives you the opportunity to film yourself and name your feelings, rate your mood. No one watches the videos. No one is judging you. So it's your version of events. Telling them helps you reflect and get to know yourself on a whole new level. So that's Mental Snap. So a few problems. Quickly. Digital exclusion. Okay, we know about digital exclusion, but just to highlight the 2 points there in pink, that people who are digitally excluded are likely to be disproportionately heavy users of government services, and the depth of digital exclusion for people with disabilities is generally much greater than for the wider population. So I think we just need to remember those things. We also, you know, often technology talks about reaching people in rural communities better, but actually it won't if we can't get better, if the technology doesn't reach through broadband access, doesn't reach our rural communities very well. So I'm just going to touch briefly, because this is about our one of the options in the debate coming up, what we do know about psychological therapies. And this is going to be one of my main points, so it's a bit unfair really to have this chance to speak ahead of the debate. But evidence shows that relationship factors correlate more with client outcome in psychotherapy than specialized treatment interventions. So the therapist matters more than the model that they're using, basically, is what the evidence tells us. Decades of research evidence tell us this. Empathy, warmth, the therapeutic alliance. And one size does not fit all. We know that as well, really. But the problem is that people carry on, you know, producing one size to fit all, I think. Access is unequal in psychological therapies, and I've touched on that already. So co-production, trying to speed up a bit, hearing from people who use mental health services about what they want and need, and that is very much about what I just said, how important it must be to work with people who are using mental health services within the design, in the co-design of any kind of new technology. That's not involving people some way down the line when you've already got this brilliant idea. It's actually coming and talking to us at the beginning, I think. And an organization like NSUN, National Survivor User Network, which has about 3.5 people working there, you know, it reaches way above its, what's that word? Punches way above its weight, is an organization that would certainly welcome working with people around all sorts of different things in mental health. The problem is money, because we are interested in putting the money to the SMEs and the other organizations who are developing the app. But when it comes to funding the service user and carer involvement, there's very much less of it to go around. And I think to come to the table as equal partners, we need also to be funded to do that. I'm going to slip through those two and just finish with my final questions then. So what I suppose I'm left with is questions like, is technology answering questions that really concern people at the receiving end of mental health services? Or is it predominantly seeking to answer more economic and supply questions that come from the service? And that has been actually a theme that came up on Twitter today as well. I've been following a little bit of the conversation on Twitter. Will technology perpetuate some of the existing treatment gaps and access issues, especially in psychological therapies? And can technology work with service users and carers to co-produce technology that answers some of the real and current concerns? And I think we should also involve more cats. That's it, thanks.
Thanks, Alison.